everyone, and welcome to episode 33 of the History Hotline and the last episode in our migration series. I am so excited. I'm sad because it's our final guest, but I'm so excited because this guest is just absolutely fantastic. And this guest actually comes highly recommended. Her fantastic friend actually messaged me and was like, "You need this girl on your podcast." And in our literal 10-15 minute chat of introduction that we've just had, I completely understand why she said that, because I'm already just like fired up and ready to go. Gems will be dropped, tables will be shaken, flipped and turned today. So I hope you are ready. Today's episode is going to be looking at the presence of Nigerian communities in Britain, and we are joined by the fantastic and wonderful Abigail Fagbolagun. Welcome.
Hi.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
I'm
Hi,
so
everyone.
happy you're here. Oh,
I'm
gosh.
so excited, guys.
It's
I'm
gonna
so
be great.
excited. I love history.
Thank you for being here for number one.
No, thank you for having me.
No, honestly. So, going to give everybody a little bio. We're going to introduce you, and then we're going to get straight in and ask you some questions, because I'm sure everybody wants to know a little bit about you before you drop all your gems on us today. So, Abigail, she studied history, of course, at the University of Essex, and looked at Nigeria, obviously. That's why she's here talking about that today. But specifically, how did Nigerians live and adapt to life in the UK? Looking at the 1960s to the early 2000s. And obviously you might be thinking, oh, early 2000s, is that history? Well, yes, it is history, because it didn't happen today. It's not in the present. But also you have to remember that not all kind of the waves of Black people migrating to this country happened in the 40s and 50s, like the Windrush generation. So I think it's quite interesting to take this perspective from a little bit later on in what we would look at normally as history, shall we say. Abigail has studied extensively, looking at different themes across history, such as obviously migration and race. She's also been able to look at a lot of British history, so she's going to be able to provide a lot of that good context. Something which I've never really studied too much, really, British history, but we've got Abigail for that. She's also been able to study African American history in quite a lot of depth, looking at things like hip hop culture in America historically, poetry, and music in regards to American slavery in the South, and kind of things related to that. So we've got a very well-versed speaker and guest today who can speak about so many different things. We will be obviously focusing on migration in Nigeria, but if you want Abigail back to be talking about hip-hop and all these other fantastic things, just let me know. I take requests, and I am already excited for what we will be talking about today. In the first 10 minutes of us speaking, Abigail has told me about 4 random historical facts. Now, I thought I was like a bit of a history nerd, which obviously I am, because I'm really here with the whole podcast. But yeah, Abigail has facts from far and wide. So do you want to give us one now, just so we can launch in?
My first random enough, is that Henry VIII was actually 6'1" in a time where most men were actually 5'5". So he was like a giant, and he actually wasn't a glutton. Like, when we look at Henry VIII, we think of someone who was always eating and fat and whatever, but he wasn't. Like, I don't know why history has presented. I'm telling you,
you've shattered everything I've ever learned about the Tudors.
Horrible histories got to confirm some stuff, because
but in portraits, he
was a bit big, but he wasn't a
he
glutton.
wasn't glutton.
Do you know what I mean? And he was serious. Like, sometimes we think of him as unserious because he had so many wives, and
I think he's serious.
He's a serious guy, and he was tall. So can you imagine most men being 5'5", and he's out here 6'1"? Every woman's dream.
Wow.
When I found that out, I was like, but the thing is, a lot of the history we learn it from media. Do you know what I mean? And everybody wants to watch something that's interesting. So when we're watching a movie about Henry VIII and he's a glutton, you're thinking, okay,
you can hate him a bit more.
You can, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's my random fact.
Wow. So let's just have a talk about you. So I've introduced you, but have a chance to introduce yourself. So who are you?
Okay, guys, I'm Abigail Fagbolagun. I'm 23. I graduated in 2020 with this whole pandemic because I did a year abroad in America.
Wow.
So I did a 4-year course, which was absolutely great. That's where I was able to do hip hop culture. Like, doing a year abroad was the best thing for me. because when it comes to history, it's good to have perspective.
Mm,
And that literally gave me a lot of perspective in terms of the fact that, let's say when we talk about World War II, right, or what the world wars, we have a start date for Europe, but when you think
yeah.
about America, America
Mm,
has another start date. So you might, if you're
absolutely.
American, you might actually say no, the world war didn't start at this time, it started at another time. So having been able to go on my year abroad was really good. So yeah, I've just graduated, looking for jobs. The job market is literally like thinner than, I don't know, me when I was young. It's so hard right now, but
You'll
I'm
get there.
doing that.
You will. Do you
Exactly.
want to stay in history? Is this
Definitely,
work
like
for
that's my
you?
thing,
Yeah.
because like I'm trying to like do history forever. Do you get what I mean? Like I want to do different
Trend
things. I want to
again.
teach. Do you get what I mean? Like history is my passion. You know, some people have a career and then they
Yeah.
have a passion. It's like ours is interlinked.
It's
Like
all
I love
one.
history
It's
on the side, and
sometimes I
I
think
love it.
it's not a good thing, but I do. What else can we do?
I just love it. Do you get what I mean? And I want to pursue
Yeah.
specifically Black British history for now, and
Hmm.
then just basically do Black
Definitely.
history. But I love wars, so I might dabble in
Hmm.
that as well.
Hmm. You- Right. Okay. Tell me, what is your favorite historical time period, if any?
I love like I was saying, the slavery period of America. Like I
Yeah.
find that really interesting because of the fact that these are human beings who went through slavery. And when we look at the
Definitely.
transatlantic slave trade, we're not looking at something we've seen before. Like this was very systematic. Do you get what I mean? And
Yeah.
for me, my favorite part of it is like slave narratives and like stories about that time, because we get to see how these people felt. Do you get what I mean?
Hmm.
And they were taken from one culture to another, and that's what I find
Yeah.
fascinating. Like, because I think of my parents, literally, they are British, but like completely not having their language,
Yeah.
completely not having their accent. Like,
Definitely.
do you get what I mean?
Just
Like
for
drinking a copper
context,
all the
sorry
time.
if someone
Yeah.
didn't get this. Abigail's obviously British Nigerian, so yeah.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mention that.
We I
I'm
can't
British
see you.
Nigerian. I'm Yoruba. Um,
Fantastic.
so yes, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
definitely.
So yeah, that's my favorite time.
I hear that. So, your research interests, you've said, yeah, you're looking at Black history specifically. When you say
Yeah,
Black British history, or other kinds of Black history, do you want to carry on looking at Nigerian people,
definitely.
or more, I don't know, different groups,
Different people
different
in general,
countries?
I would say,
Yeah.
because the way the Black British community is,
Mm.
we're all from different places, but we're all in this. Do you know what I mean? We're all
Yeah,
in this
there's a
together.
there
Like
is a, I think especially with young people there is a Black British youth, not
exactly.
movement
There,
because we're not protesting anything, but
yeah,
there's a community. There's a sense of us.
exactly.
Yeah, I
Pride
hear
and
that.
us that
Yeah.
I don't know if the previous generations had. Like maybe they
No.
were just fighting for their lives, but
Mhm.
now it's like we are here. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can't stop asking me where I'm from, Ninja. Like even though I am proud to be Nigerian,
Yeah.
don't ask me where I'm from when I tell you I'm from London. Do you get what I mean? Because I know you're
Absolutely.
trying to dig deeper to find out where this melanated skin comes from. But so for me, I do want to do Nigerian history, but more Black British
Yeah.
lot, definitely, because I think it's going to be not it would be easier for me to just do all of us, and then I guess if I'm going to specific places, then I would
Yeah.
do like, okay, the Nigerian church, for example, or the Caribbean
Absolutely.
church, for do you go what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing. Black British history doesn't have to be a group of people. You can look at
Yeah,
themes, you can look at places, you can look at
exactly,
spaces, you can look at activism, you can look at anything. So
exactly. So
fantastic,
yeah.
fantastic. Okay. Before
Yeah.
we get into our main discussion, we're gonna look at like a mini history of Nigeria and
Hmm.
why Nigerian people ended up in Britain. Do you want to give us another fun fact?
Some people do know that that people would keep food in their braids.
Yeah,
They
during
would put
slavery.
rice in there, yes, during
Mhm.
slavery. So
Yeah,
that's a
that's
fun
it.
fact. So when people just talk about braids, like it's just like braids
Mm.
is more than a protective style. Braids is, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like
definitely.
literally our culture.
And it was a lifesaver,
Yeah, it was a lifesaver, I'm telling you.
literally. I
So,
think
and
they
people had
used
long
to,
hair, so
yeah, and braid maps into hair. Their Underground Railroad, I
yes,
think they used to
exactly.
braid maps into the hair or
Matt.
paths to
Yeah,
freedom.
exactly.
So, okay, now let us think about Nigeria. Go on,
Okay.
set the scene. What is the history of Nigeria? I'm gonna pretend I know nothing. I know very little. Honestly, my
Okay, so we know that the British have been in Africa
yeah,
for a while now. And so slavery was abolished in the 1800s, the late
Okay.
1800s. But we see that the British, well, the European powers always wanted more than just enslave people or gold. They wanted more, they wanted land. And so we see the British come back. So basically, we really see them take control in 1851. They
Yeah.
take over the colony of Lagos. Basically, there was an uncle that was in power. He was taken out of power, and his nephew took place, right?
Okay.
And the uncle wanted to go back into power. Um, and so basically, the British help him take his kingdom back. And so in 1851, they come, there's a little war, you could call it,
Yeah.
and he regains power. And then in 1861, the British basically forced the they call them Oba, which is
Yeah.
king, the
Yeah.
king of Lagos, to sign this treaty, basically saying we're going to take control
Oh, wow.
of Lagos. And so he does
Hmm.
it. He doesn't want to, but he does it.
Yeah.
And then over the next few years, we see that basically the British government or even like the monarchy gives permission to companies to take over bits of
Uh-huh.
Nigeria.
Yes.
So we see different companies. You may have heard of the Royal Niger Company. Sometimes we
Hmm.
even talk about the Royal Indian Company when it comes to
Yeah.
India. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of royal companies going
Mm.
around to different countries. And so we basically see that going on. So there are different companies that basically take control of different parts
Yeah.
of Nigeria. And then basically, the Royal Niger Company did something that the British didn't like. And so they
Mm.
sold their holdings to the British. Okay, so in 1899, the Royal Niger Company sold their holdings to the British for £865,000. So the British basically bought
Mm.
Nigeria from the British, which is
Yeah.
weird.
Just to say as
Um,
well, sorry to cut you,
yeah,
that 865,000 in 1899 is
40
46,407,250 in today's money. So,
guys,
yeah.
like that's crazy. So from there we basically see the British take over. And then at this point Nigeria wasn't Nigeria is today. Do you get what I mean? It was
Yeah.
just places. And so the British brought the south and the north together and they created
Mm.
Nigeria. And
They
then we
forced them
get
together, right? Because
they
I feel
forced them
like this is
together.
different
They
ethnic
created the
groups.
lines. Yeah, so we have
Yeah.
in Niger actually we have over 400 ethnic groups. Obviously, they all come out of one ethnic group, but
Yeah.
there's so many. So that's when it comes to looking at Africa. When you look at the lines of every single country, the people on those lines on the borders are going to have
Yeah.
such similar culture because
Of
truly you
course.
could have moved those lines how many kilometers and you would have been Nigeria. You know, which is
Wow. And now you're classed as Nigerian, but before you were whatever your ethnic group was
you
or
were
your
tribe
tribe or
exactly. Tribes were most important. That's one thing to highlight
yeah.
when it comes to looking at Africa. You would look at tribes. You
Mm.
wouldn't look at because even now we still tribes are very important in
Yeah.
Africa. Do you get what I mean? And so yeah, so in the 50s, people have always not liked the British being there because
Of
people have
course.
pride. As African people have pride.
Mm.
And so it's like how can someone take over our land? So in 1958, the British finally agreed that okay, we're gonna give you
Yeah.
you're gonna give your land back. You're gonna be Nigeria. And so on the 1st of October 1960,
Yeah.
the Nigeria became independent. And so that's where we start to see Nigerian migration to the UK.
Okay. That is like a whistle stop tour. I like
Yes,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
guys, go and research. It's a lot to like
Of course. And this
say in
podcast
one
is
bit.
always just a starting point for further
Yeah,
research.
starting
There is
point.
never going to be an episode where everything is said in one
It's
place because
impossible. There's so much.
honestly, and even just from, my own like little bits of reading here and there, like even pre 1899,
Yeah.
pre that point where enslaved people were being taken and shipped over to the Caribbean and the Americas.
Yes.
There's a whole history of that as well.
There's so
Like
much.
as West African people, we are, and I say we, yes, I'm
Yes.
Jamaican, but we're everywhere because we were taken
Yes.
from these regions of Africa and
100%.
dropped off on many different stops on these slave ships. And so,
Yeah.
this is a very, very, very big and I think important history as well, not just specifically
Important.
Nigeria,
Yeah.
but Africa generally. I think it's important when we do Black history, and it's something I've always wanted to do more, but just not felt able to. We need to go
Mm.
back to Africa to
Yeah.
understand our roots,
It's
our
where
culture,
everything
our
started.
heritage. It's where it all started. It's who we
Yeah.
are as Black people if you're listening
Exactly.
to this. So
Yeah.
let us move on. Let us not dwell too
Oh my
long.
gosh, do you want me to give you a random fact? I can give you a
Oh,
random
go on then.
fact about slavery. which I find really disturbing though. So, as you said, Africans were taken to the Americas, well, whether that is the USA that we know today
Mm-hmm.
and Latin America. And in USA, the masters would take more care of their enslaved people because they wanted their money's worth. But in the
Yeah.
Caribbean, the average age that a man would die in the Caribbean at the beginning of slavery was 24 years
Yeah, yeah,
old,
yeah, yeah,
because they
yeah.
were so aware that they could just go back to Africa
Mhm.
and
Yep.
another group of people and enslave them,
Yep.
which I just think is correct. Like, these are human
Honestly.
beings. The
Yeah.
only thing that's different about us is that some of us are more pigmented than other
Others.
people.
Hmm.
That's why I always say that race, we all know that race doesn't make sense because it doesn't account for all people.
No.
When we talk about African people, we talk about them being black. When we talk about people from Europe, we talk about them being white. How can you only have something that accounts for two people?
Yep.
It's just, all of it is,
Absolutely.
anyway,
It
crazy.
is. It is phenomenal.
It
Absolutely.
is.
But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Thank you again for the fun fact. Although I think your facts are coming less
It's
fun.
okay.
They're facts, but I don't know if they're fun
They
anymore.
are. They're not fun
Slavery
facts
is
anymore.
not fun.
They're sad facts.
They
Tell
are
you
sad
that.
facts. Abigail's sad facts. Tune in. Thinking about Nigeria, of course, positioned in West Africa. We left kind of our little last point in the 60s, where Nigeria has independence, October 1st, 1960. And so, how does independence look, but what does that look like? Is it going well? What's happening? I feel like you've got regions and nations pushed together, tribes pushed together, and
Yeah.
forced to be one. I'm sure the British government have put parliament in place and put their political
Yes.
structures in place and their education system. So yeah,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
So, as you said, like, the British have been here for a while, so we see a lot of Christianity in Nigeria, and like you said, there have been parliaments. There are British people who live in Nigeria who are um basically controlling Nigeria, but they are leaving now, and so the
Yeah.
Nigerian government start to send people to the UK on scholarships, on 4-year scholarships, to gain education so that they can take over these posts. And so
Okay.
that's why we start to see Nigerians come to the UK.
As
Obviously,
students with
people as
purpose.
students with
Aha.
purpose.
So
And
not
it's not
like with the
like,
Windrush generation as, workers that then fall into
yeah,
unskilled labour because they can't get any other jobs to
yeah,
rebuild Britain post-war. These people are coming with a purpose of getting an education with money, I'm assuming,
funding, yeah. And
with the
some people
intention
weren't
of
even
going home.
funded and they
Well,
came. But Nigeria was at a place where the UK wasn't where you wanted to be anyway.
okay.
Do you know what I mean? There wasn't
Yep.
much that was appealing to you from Britain. Like, the
It's
British
still
are
the
in Britain, like,
same.
where are you going? The British are in Niger, the British, like, do you get what I mean? And
Yeah.
so we see a lot of people coming and going.
Yep.
It was no like, I want to stay. It was like,
Mm,
peace out. But obviously there were people who would stay. Some
yep.
people would fall in love here, decide that, you
Absolutely.
know what, this is the country for them. And so from that period, from that's my research showed me that 60s, that's
Hmm.
where we really see the influx of Nigerians
Okay.
coming into the
Wow.
UK.
That's quite
Even though it's
interesting
small, but
because
yeah.
I don't know if you ever watched Desmond's.
Yeah, I
Um,
love it.
and I know if anyone has watched it, the character of Matthew, he's not Nigerian. I can't remember what country he's from. It's not Nigeria though.
Yeah.
But he comes as a student and he's just doing courses and courses and courses all throughout
Yes.
the seasons. Whereas you have the Guyanese, like barbershop workers, Pork Pie, the Pegan Prince, who's I think
Yeah.
Jamaican, and Desmond himself, who are working. They've come at an older age. They've got families
Yeah.
now. They can't go anywhere. Even though
Yeah.
Desmond's dream is to go home one day, like he can't do that because he's
Yeah.
financially trapped. Whereas with Matthew's character, it seems like he could go at any. Is it Matthew or Michael?
At any time.
Matthew.
One of
Michael's
them,
his
it's an
son.
M.
Yeah, he
Okay.
can go back at any time, absolutely. And I think that's very interesting when we think about the kind of profile of people of
Hmm.
this migration, and what that then means in terms of maybe even class for the future.
Yes.
If you've got people that are coming with degrees or that are getting
Yeah.
degrees from British universities, not from universities that aren't trusted by the British.
Yeah.
And so there's a difference there when we're thinking about potentially comparing different groups of migrants in
Exactly.
this country in the
Which is
60s.
amazing that they were even able to capture that
Yeah,
in a TV program.
right.
Yeah.
TV in the 90s, I'm sorry, but it was really
Yeah.
doing the things that today should be
It
doing. But
if we even start, we're gonna be here forever.
we will be forever. But I
When
just want to say, since it happened literally today, the day we're recording, Steve McQueen's Small Axe has just been nominated for 15 BAFTAs.
oh my,
15, or as in different
15.
actors, actresses, producing, directing, all that kind of stuff. So
Wow, that is
I feel
amazing.
like we're getting back to a golden age of Black British TV.
I hope so.
I pray so. Anyway, so continuing on. Most countries, not most countries in Africa, a lot of countries in Africa and a lot of countries around the world, let's be
Mm.
honest, have this thing that happens called a civil war.
Yes.
Now, we're not going to go into the whole depths of the civil war because
Yeah.
no civil war is simple. We know this. The
At
American one,
all.
long enough. British have had a civil war. Everybody had a civil war. So the Nigerian civil war, though, does that have an impact on migration?
From what I found, no. When I first went into
Okay.
this research, I went into it as people came because of the war. Do you get what
Yeah.
I mean? And I remember I was on the phone to one of my friend's dad,
Yeah.
and he was like, "No, that's not what happened." And I was like, and he was like, "Yes, people came because of independence." So when
Mm,
you do look at migration, you hardly see people coming because of that civil war,
yeah.
especially because you could say it was a small part of Nigeria fighting, the other part it was
Okay.
more so the Igbo
Yeah.
Igbo people. So yeah, we actually don't see that having an impact.
That's interesting. That
But
is.
the Nigerian civil war is very important. The
Yeah.
Biafra war.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you. And I'm thinking then, okay, when was the big wave then? Because 1960s, as you said, people coming as students, a lot returning home,
Yeah.
but we have a huge Nigerian community in this country,
Yeah.
especially in London. London actually has, from the 2011 census, actually,
Yes.
114,718 Nigerian born. So that's not even second generation.
Yeah.
In their population, the borough of Suffolk, even though it's Southwark,
Yes. Which is
being the
crazy.
biggest. So yeah, South London
Yeah.
obviously seeing the kind of mass of that migration, and then other regions kind of following on. So what happened
Yeah.
in the 80s then that led to this
So
this
I
wave?
believe there's like cultural and like government like beef, I would say, with the people. I guess this is when you really see the Nigerian government doing
Oh
higgy hagger. They've been doing
yeah,
higgy hagger for years, but here's where we see it. And so in the 80s and 90s, we see I think it also has to do with oil. There's so many different things.
of course.
We see loads of Nigerians actually in the 90s, the Nigerian population increased by 86%. So we
Wow.
see a massive like psh, do you know what I mean? Like we see like there's more people and literally like you said, most Yoruba people who migrate actually are found in South London. Like when you
Wow.
look all over the world, which is crazy.
Yeah,
So I'm so
definitely.
happy I grew up in South London. I love that.
But also, I feel like Yoruba are the dominating kind of numbers when it comes to Nigerians
Yeah,
migrating here.
in the UK,
But
yes,
are they the
because
biggest group in Nigeria?
no, they're not. They're one of the. They're actually small. When we look at
Small but loud.
migrate, small but loud. That's why I love Yoruba people. I always say if I wasn't Yoruba, I would have an issue with us. Like we are so
Of
loud.
course.
But Fulani slash Hausa people are
Yeah.
the biggest tribe in
Okay.
Nigeria. Like majority,
Yeah.
and then we see other tribes. We see Yoruba, we see Igbo, we
Mhm.
see Benin people. There are so many different tribes.
Of course.
But when it comes to, I guess, the UK, like Yoruba people are so loud because when it comes to migration, my research has basically told me that okay, let me say that again. The research that I've seen when it comes to Nigerian migration is Yoruba people come to the UK,
Yeah.
Igbo people go to the US, and
Wow.
Hausa people slash Fulani people, when they do migrate, go to Muslim countries. So
Right,
you'll find
because
them
they're
in the
Muslim.
UAE because they're
Ah,
Muslim. It makes sense for them to go
definitely.
to
Why
those
would they come to
places
Britain to do
to Britain.
Islamophobia and racism?
Exactly. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And sometimes we forget how important
Mhm.
faith and religion is to people,
Of
and it has
course.
a big impact
Definitely.
on people's lives. And so that's why I guess Yoruba people are so loud here. But even that was back in the day, but even now, when
Yeah.
I look at Nigerians in the US, I see mostly Igbo people.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Why do you think then
Yeah.
there's a difference with the Yoruba people and the Igbo people that go from, do you know what I mean, go to the US and go?
Yeah. I have no idea
Oh,
really. I
yeah.
really don't know. But it does like have an impact on Nigerian faith in the UK also, like
Of course.
everything interlinks.
Yes,
But I have no
definitely.
idea why Igbos
America. Well,
are
then I guess
going there.
sometimes it's the same thing with any group of people, and I think maybe instead of lumping groups of people from Nigeria as Nigerians,
Yeah.
we should be looking at it in
You
separate,
have to,
because
yeah.
Jamaicans probably, I'm sure there's regions in Jamaica, even though it's such a tiny island, that all went
Yeah.
to a certain part of the UK, maybe Handsworth, maybe Brixton,
Exactly.
maybe Tottenham. And so the same thing is happening there. But because we have, and by we I mean British people have said,
Yeah.
Nigeria, you are one clump. We are just
Yeah.
like, oh well, everyone just came to England, when it's actually, there's sorry, what's the word? Nuances. There's
Yes,
complexities to this
exactly.
that are
Black people are
definitely
not one.
overshadowed. We're not.
Like, we're not all the
Black
same.
people are
And
not one. Caribbean people are not one. African people are
exactly.
certainly not one. Nigerian people are not
People,
one.
and then Yoruba people, like
Right?
even
Oh gosh.
inside, like when I was doing my
But there's more.
dissertation and my dad was walking me through. So I'm
Yeah.
from Osun State in
Okay.
Nigeria, so that's OSUN.
Yeah.
And my dad was walking me through the Ijesha people, Ilesha people. I was thinking,
Wow.
wait, not
There's
me just
more of
thinking
us.
I'm that. There's more. Like the older you get, it's funny because when I was younger, I was just Nigerian. Now I'm a bit older, I'm Yoruba. Do you get what
Yeah.
I mean? And not that I'm not Nigerian anymore, but I'm
Hmm.
just digging deeper. And the
Absolutely.
older we get, you dig deeper. And even when I was
Definitely.
doing research for my dissertation, interviewing people, I found out that tribalism was a massive thing back home that I
Yeah, of
just didn't really
course.
know about.
It is. And I
So
think
yeah.
it's, I feel like when I hear about it, maybe as an outsider, I hear it as being quite a divisive thing. You know,
Yeah, unfortunately, kind of like race.
yeah,
You
because
could
it
say,
is a,
even though it's hard to compare anything to race,
yeah,
I think,
definitely.
because
Yeah, because
race,
it's so polarizing.
it's just not
Definitely.
even, it's just so much. But
Mm,
yeah, because when I interviewed somebody, she said that even looking for a job in places, so she's Igbo, and when she
yeah,
would go to places that weren't Igbo, they
yeah.
would hire the person, let's say she was in the Yoruba part, they would
Mm,
hire the person who was Yoruba because they didn't want to
wow.
hire someone who was Igbo. But then
Mm,
again, I couldn't necessarily say that's the whole of Niger because I
yeah.
haven't been to Nigeria, and
Okay.
that's someone's experience, and that was like back in the day.
Yeah,
So I think
definitely.
tribes will always have something when it comes to Africa.
Hmm.
When we look at even when we look at Cameroon and we look
Yeah.
at the English speakers and the French speakers, I
Hmm.
still blame the British though for
Of
all the
course.
tribalism.
Well,
But
they drew
yeah,
lines on a map with
they
no
drew lines,
regard to where people. Forget even drawing lines
which
with
is
regard. They went there. Who told?
that's the maddest thing. As in, imagine going into someone's home and being like, okay, this is now mine. Whatever you make, you give to me.
Take all the food, all the natural
Yeah,
resources, all the plants growing, and take some people as well and ship them off to another country.
exactly. And say that you're here to civilize us and you're here to
Mm,
bring Christianity and
mm,
faith. And not
mm.
to say that there's anything wrong with faith at
Yep,
all. Come on, like I'm a Christian, but
yep.
don't hide behind something.
Behind,
Do you
yep,
know what I mean? And
exactly.
that's
Don't
my
and don't
issue.
do bad, evil, corrupt things in the name of God.
That's what they would
Mm.
do, but that's another podcast.
I think so too. Definitely. Okay, right. So what we are here
Yeah.
to talk about today is then, and now I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
Nigerians, quote unquote, in Britain.
Yes.
What does that culture look like? We've said Yoruba people are loud. That's what you said, not me. No, and
Yeah.
nobody come for me. Abigail's
Yoruba
word.
people are loud, guys. We can be
Um,
loud and we can be quiet, like all people.
so what are our thoughts? What are your findings, should we say? What does
Yes.
Nigerian culture look like in Britain? And also, we're looking at it in a different way that we look at the Windrush. And I'm sorry to keep comparing, but
Yeah, no,
it's,
of
I
course.
guess, a base level of understanding for most listeners. You know, Nigerians aren't the first black people in Britain. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe some of the legwork is done by
Mm-hmm.
earlier Caribbean communities and earlier African people that came.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't looked at any other countries in Africa yet on this podcast who might have come earlier than
Yeah.
Nigerians. So that
Ghanaians might
legwork
have
is
been
kind
here
of
a bit
done.
earlier, actually.
What was that, sorry?
Ghanaians might have been here a little bit earlier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe different other countries that were colonized by the British.
Yeah.
So yeah, what does Nigerian culture look like in Britain? Is it different to back home? Is it, easy? Is it simple? Go on, talk me through it.
Okay, so I always love talking about culture in different places because oh my gosh, I just love it because you can study this from a historical perspective.
Yeah,
You can study this from I think it's called anthropology when you study human
yeah,
beings. Because when I was doing my dissertation and I was looking at a simulation, I was looking at some people. So there's different um definitions
yeah.
or even words that can explain the way people assimilate. Some people come to the UK and decide that the British culture is what is going to be their culture.
Mm-hmm.
Some people reject British culture and be like, Nigerian culture is all I'm going to have.
Yeah.
Some people mix, and some people just don't even do nothing.
Mm.
Whatever comes, comes.
Yeah.
So when we look at Nigerian culture in the UK, I had three chapters:
Yeah.
livelihood and school, faith, and then access to home.
Okay.
And so basically, I was just looking at Nigerian culture in the UK, or maybe what Nigerians even came to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the biggest thing that I found was faith.
Yeah.
That was a massive part, that and still is a massive part of Nigerian culture in the
Definitely.
UK. Like, I meet people and I'm like, what church did you grow up in? Like,
Yeah.
what church did you grow up in? Or what mosque did you grow up in? Do you get what I mean? So most people, if you know someone who's Nigerian, they probably grew up in church. Do you
Yeah.
get what I mean? And so also when we look at that, we see that Yoruba people um are Pentecostal Christians, and Igbo people are usually Catholics,
Yeah.
which all has to do with colonialism as well, and what the British done, where the British went. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and so my first chapter, like I said, I was looking at livelihood and schooling, and like I said, people came over to learn. Some people started to come over just to get an education. They didn't really know if they were going back, if they were staying.
Yeah.
And one of my most interesting findings I kind of knew before was this thing called farming. So this
Okay.
is where
Oh, yes.
Nigerians, yes, would foster off their children to white families outside of London
Yeah.
for a few years while they studied, because obviously people always say it takes a village to raise a child. And when we look at Africa, when we look at the Caribbean, this is really how they were doing it. But a lot
Yeah.
of people were coming with no family. Do you know what I mean? And some people literally got pregnant and found out that they were on their own. So
Mm-hmm.
these students would farm their children to these families. And
Mm.
some people would stay for 2, 3 years while their parents got that degree, but some people would stay for longer. Some people
Wow.
never saw their parents again. So when we talk about farming, it's something that's a bit difficult, because a lot of farming went well, but a
Yeah.
lot of it didn't. And there's even a case of a young girl who died
Oh
in
gosh.
yeah, in the care of her foster parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people would go through a system. I believe the government actually helped out, but some
Yeah.
people would just go off, look, my friend recommended this woman, I'm going to give my child to this woman.
Wow.
And they would pay these families to look after their children. There's a movie called Farming and another
Yeah.
movie called the Last Tree. Both
Yeah.
of them are actually really good movies to understand farming, and both of them are real. Yeah, The Last Tree and Farming the movie, they're both different perspectives. You get farming literally runs you through a child that was completely left in, you could say, wasn't completely, but he grew up in Britain, like his parents had come back for him. And then The Last Tree kind of takes you on the journey of a person who has been through farming, and how do I get back into normal life?
Yeah.
Because a lot of these people didn't know they were black. Like,
Yeah.
race is one of those things. You've grown up with white people, you know something is different about you, but you can't pinpoint it.
Or you
You
can't
know,
verbalize it. You don't
you
have
can't
the
verbalize
words,
it
the
because
language.
nobody else can verbalize it
Yeah.
for you. And so by 1964, so this is only 4 years after independence, we see 1,743 children fostered
Mm-hmm.
in these homes, but these are only official numbers. We don't know
Wow.
about the people who did private fostering.
Of course.
So these farming is crazy, because a lot of people don't know that this happened.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that people just couldn't handle it. One of my interviewees, she just said she couldn't handle working, looking for a job, schooling, and looking after her son. So she
Mm.
fostered her kid out, and he still remembers, even though he left at 2 years old, he still remembers her. She was nice, and a lot of people
Wow.
still go back. And so yeah, that was a massive part of my findings. And then, like I said, faith was a big part of that, and it wasn't just that you would go to church or mosque and worship God and then leave. It was so much more than that. And so, like I said, um, there are more Christians in the UK, Nigerian Christians, than there are Muslims. Even
Yeah.
though majority of Nigerians are
Muslim.
actually Muslim.
Yeah.
So in the UK, we only see about 9% of Nigerians being Muslim, and the
Wow.
majority then are Christian, and we have
Mm-hmm.
some people that are atheists.
Yeah.
But even that is hard to find because that. But we also have people who are, you don't see it so much, but people who basically still believe in Nigerian. Nigerian religion, even though
Okay.
you can't really call it religion, it's so hard to break. When we look at religion, we look at certain, like, there are
Mm,
rules, regulations, if that
yeah.
makes sense. I don't like to say rules and regulations, but when we look at Yoruba religion, to be specific, it isn't really like religion. It's kind of not
Absolutely.
free flowing, but
Like a
there's so
belief
much more of it.
system.
A belief system, yes. And so there's so much with it, and that's why we
Wow.
even see it continue, I guess, as we like go through slavery.
Yeah.
We see a lot of it, but it's much more, when it comes to religion, like I said, rules and regulations. When we talk
Yeah.
to Christian, Muslim, it's like bang bang bang, no, I can't be half Muslim, half Christian.
Hmm.
But when we look at African religion or African faith,
Yeah.
even when it came to slavery, and black people were okay with accepting Christianity because they was just like, we're just going to mix it in. Do
Yeah.
you get me? And so
That makes
even when it
sense.
came to burials, for example, in um, Black America during slavery time, they would, okay, have Christianity in that
Yep.
burial, but they would also do what their ancestors did.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
they kind of
Yeah.
mixed. So that's why I say it's more like,
Traditions.
I would say it's deeper in a way, but it's like very like relaxed. Like, we're not going
Mm.
to beef you, if that makes sense. So we
Yeah.
see a little bit of that in the UK, but not majority. Hard to
Okay.
find evidence
Wow.
of that. So yeah, like church for me especially was a big thing because you would meet people and then you would go to their weddings.
Yeah.
Like, it was how people got to know each other. So
Yeah.
coming to the UK from Nigeria or from
Hmm.
wherever you were, and you found a faith hub, it was
Hmm.
perfect because then you could get a job. You
Hmm.
could meet someone. Your pastor probably knew people in the community.
Yeah.
People could support you. You wanted to open a business. We see a lot of Nigerian business owners actually in the UK.
Wow.
If people want, like, it's free advertising. You go into
Yeah,
church, guys,
exactly.
I'm
Yeah,
opening it
yeah, and you've got a community that are wanting to support you
to support you,
as
exactly. And
Christians
that's
and as fellow
and
Nigerians.
exactly that
Mm.
kind of what you're offering.
Yeah,
So
which is how
um
community is formed.
is formed, exactly, and
Right.
that's how we see Nigerians function in the UK. My research took me to Manchester as well, but nowhere else
Yeah.
really. Yeah,
So, thinking about church and it being a huge part of Nigerian culture in the UK because of the fact that, as you said, so many people that came from Nigeria would have been Christian and set up
yeah,
community in the church. Were there specific churches, denominations? Because I know Nigerians are probably like, yeah, Church of England Catholic, but, these
yeah.
specific churches in the community, what kind of churches were they?
So, like I was saying before, Yoruba people are Pentecostal Christians usually, which is
Yeah.
an extension of the Protestant church. And then we see Iwa people being Catholics.
Hmm.
Um, and so when we look at churches in the UK, there's specific churches like CAC, which is the church I grew up in, Christ Apostolic Church,
Yeah.
which was founded in Nigeria
Wow.
in 1940, in the 1940s
Yeah.
or 1900s.
Yeah.
So by 2009, they had over 500,000 worshippers in the UK. We also see the Redeemed Christian Church of God,
Yeah.
which is a massive church, like every Nigerian knows about Redeemed. And then
Mm.
there's KICC, which is Kingsway International Christian Center. So
Yeah.
these are very popular churches
Yeah.
that we see Nigerians going to
Hmm.
during the 80s, early 2000s, and even now. I meet people and be like, what CAC did you go to? Do you get what I mean? Or
Yeah.
like, we've all been to a Redeemed Church. So these churches were very important for
Yeah.
the culture,
I guess.
for meeting people,
Yeah.
whether you were really, really like about your relationship with Christ or not.
Yeah.
These places were very, very important. And like you said, Southwark
Hmm.
like has a lot. Like, even now, you can go to South, like Peckham. In fact, there are so many churches.
Wow.
And a fun fact actually is that uh,
Another one.
Southwark has the biggest concentration of African Christians outside of Africa. So
Wow.
it would be Africa number one, and then number two wouldn't just be London, it would be Southwark, South London. Do you know how crazy that is? As in
That's
the
insane.
biggest populate, like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you grew up in Peckham, if you know family that in Peckham or like South London, you know that you can pass so many different churches. We see the impact that Nigerian British Nigerians have had on not only their culture in the UK but
Hmm.
on South London.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? On Peckham, like when we look at the hairdressers,
Yeah.
like so many Nigerians own these hairdressers. Like, there's even a part of Peckham next to Asda, if you know about Asda, and like, let's say you're walking towards like Camberwell,
Mhm.
there's a bit that like I like to call Lagos
Yeah.
because it's like it's just Nigerian shops.
Yeah.
Even though gentrification is real, but white people have been in South for years. But anyways, there's like random like white shops that, but you can
Yeah.
get like everything you need, and that's one thing that I loved about growing up in South London.
Yeah. Right. Let us quickly talk about, I don't mean to rush it, but access to
No,
home.
it's fine.
And then
Yes,
we will have said all we have to say about
all
Nigeria.
we have to
So
say, yeah.
yeah, I guess stay tuned for the
So,
next 5, 10, 15, maybe minutes. And
do you
then
know
we
what?
will be
Access to
done.
home is very, it's just your norm. Like
Hmm.
access to home just talks about the access you have to a home.
And
So whether
home
that's
being
the
Nigeria.
entire home being Nigeria.
Yeah.
So like I said, my question was, how did Nigerians live and adapt within the UK?
Hmm.
Having access to home helped them.
Yeah.
So my chapter was basically broken down into communication.
Yeah.
So we talk about letters being sent, we talk about phone calls.
Yeah.
It's so funny because when you're watching Nollywood movies, you always see people, if it's like a movie in the village,
Hmm.
someone will go to the person who has a phone, you pay, then you call the person wherever you're trying to
Yeah.
call. And that's basically what a lot of people would do to communicate with people back home.
Hmm.
Then another thing we have is food. The access to food gives you
Fantastic.
access to home.
Now we're
If I'm
talking.
eating, God, I'm telling you, like when I was interviewing um one of my friend's mum, actually, she was talking about the fact that she was able to eat the food that she ate in her village,
Yeah.
that she ate at home, like that made her feel like better. Do you know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like, okay, I don't have people who are my Nigerian and who are my next door neighbors, but
Yeah.
the fact that I have access to food.
Hmm.
And when we talk about culture, the first thing we really talk about is always food. Do you get what
Definitely.
I
I
mean?
agree.
Because we kind of all have access to that. When it comes to music, some people are deaf, like they can't hear music. Do you get
Yeah.
what I mean? But like one of the things we have access to, all of us, is food. You
Food.
have to eat.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? And so literally having that taste is so good. It's so important. Like but yeah, the fact that they were able to go to shops, markets, like all of those things helped people have access to home.
Hmm.
And then we also look at media.
Of course.
We know about like Ben TV, like watching Nollywood, like people would watch it on cassettes because obviously there
Of
weren't really
course. Yeah.
CDs, you know. So all of these things help a person get situated in a place. Even when we go to university, we take things that remind us of our home, whether that's your one pillow or that teddy that you've had
Pictures.
for 10
Yeah.
years that you ain't washed that might have COVID. Those things make us feel at
Teddy's
home. So
infected.
yeah.
Definitely.
So yeah,
Okay.
that's literally access to home. Access to home was just,
Fantastic.
it was a small chapter because it's something that I guess even if you were studying people who are Asian, you would have a chapter like
Hmm.
that because it's really
Definitely.
important to look at.
Right. Let us wrap up this episode with our closing words. So, Abigail, where shall we find you?
Yeah.
Plug your socials, plug anything you want to plug at this point, and then we will wrap up.
I'm on Instagram, um, ABIGAEL_XO. I have Twitter, but I can't give you like my Twitter because I just chat nonsense on there. But yes, if you follow me on Instagram, that would be great because like hopefully by the grace of God soon I'm gonna set up a website because I just want to continue researching because I feel like once you graduate you have and you want to
Mhm.
be a historian, you can't just stop
Oh
and
yeah,
wait.
you
You have to
can't.
continue to do research. So I want to like I was saying, my big thing is Black
Yeah,
British like youth. I guess youth actually stops at 24, but I want to go
yeah.
further than that. Like
Younger adults.
so I basically want to look at the second generation
Absolutely. That's
of all of
fantastic.
us. Do you get what
Yeah.
I mean? And obviously for Caribbeans that would be maybe third or fourth
Yeah, we really
generation.
do
But
numbers out
basically,
here.
I just want to look at us, bro.
I know.
Literally. So I just want to look at us. So that's definitely what I'm. This summer, actually, I need to get myself a camera. I'm just gonna take pictures of people in general, but specifically
Yeah.
Black people, and just have that like. And in 10 years' time, I'm gonna come up with a book. The
Your
summer after
archive. Yeah,
quarantine.
definitely.
Yeah, 'cause pictures are so important. Like I love when I see pictures of like Black people like back in the
Yeah, me
day
too.
or back in the, like even in the 90s or 80s. I just
Yeah,
love it.
it's
It's just
great.
like look at them in Britain.
Definitely.
Do you get what I mean?
Indeed.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for this episode. It's been
Thank you for having
fantastic.
this. Has been so
I've learned
good.
so much. I think Nigeria's history, Nigerian culture building, community building in Britain. Audience, obviously, you're still listening, and I'm sure you feel the same way. This is the end of our migration series, and I just feel like we finished with such a high point. We might have to reload it. We might have to reload the series. need
Be
to.
worth
I need
it.
to look at more countries in Africa specifically, because as we've said, it is the beginning.
Ghana would be such a good
Yes, of course,
place.
Ghana.
Such a good place.
I've really wanted to look at some of the countries colonized by the French, but that's actually about a year of reading I need to do about French colonization before I can
Yeah,
even dip my toe. So,
dip your
mm.
toe.
So for now, this is what we have presented our migration series from the
Yeah.
History Hotline with our final guest, our final fantastic guest, Abigail. Thank you so much for being on the episode today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, guys. I hope you learned loads of stuff and follow me or look out for me.
Absolutely.
You're
And
gonna
I'll
see me
plug all
soon
her
anyway.
pages on the social media posts, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. So you can find her, and I'll
Yes.
plug her website
LinkedIn.
when we get there. So yeah, you'll definitely be able
Yeah.
to continue, and we're all gonna hope to see Abigail writing these books, publishing these articles, blogs in the future. So
Yes.
where
Hopefully books that people not that people read, but sometimes there are history books that only
yeah,
academics
yeah, yeah.
read.
I can't do that.
Like nobody in their
Nope.
normal life is gonna
It's not
read
for me.
this
It's not the
book
work I
or this
want to do. This is why I
article.
have a podcast.
It's
It's not for today's episode.
bruh, and
Wrapping
I
up.
love it because it's
People
accessible.
aren't
That's why I
reading
love what
these
you're doing.
articles that are firstly behind a paywall, or secondly in £40
Right.
books that are only published by university
Right.
presses. Sorry.
And even we
We
historians
can't
aren't
afford
reading it.
it. Do you know how many
We
books I
can't
have that I'm
afford it.
literally like, I'll have to wait to find it in a library and sit in the library because I don't have
Bro,
institutional access.
I'm telling
Anyway,
you.
that's the end of that. Thank you for listening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.